Hello, 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 and welcome to a quick rundown of Victoria 3 Dev Diary number 165. I am in Spain, or Pain, your choice. This is the first dev diary covering narrative content for the upcoming DLC, Iberian Twilight, and the free 1.12 update. However, there was an additional dev diary that came out earlier this week. As was mentioned in last week's dev diary, changes to modding were supposed to be covered. However, because of how much content there was, they gave it its own dev diary. Dev diary number 164, Marvelous Modding Monday. I didn't do a dedicated video for this one because I don't know much about modding. I enjoy mods, but I've never tried to create one myself, so I don't have a lot of knowledge on the subject. With this dev diary, there are two things to point out. First, if you are a modder, this is a dev diary you absolutely need to read through. From the sound of it, they're changing a lot with how mods are created. Again, I don't have enough background to fully articulate why, but it sounds like they're completely changing the way your databases are created. Second, if you are a person who uses mods, not someone who creates them, but just someone who even uses them, the important information about this dev diary is that this update will break your mods. That's right. When the 1.12 update is released, all mods will need to be updated in order to work with 1.12. Obviously, this is a big deal in the modding world. But from the sound of it, it will make modding a lot better and a lot easier. Again, I don't fully know, but it's a lot of something, so read through the dev diary. And now back to Spain and Pain. So if you're a busy gamer on the go and don't have time to read the full dev diary, here is a quick TLDR rundown of what was discussed. As always, if you want to read the full dev diary, and I highly suggest that you do, a link to it is in the description. In the first part of the dev diary, we go over free content that will be added to the 1.12 update. At game start, Spain will be in the midst of a civil war called the Carlist War. You can begin the game with Isabelline Spain, or No Revolting Spain, or you can start as Carlist Spain, the Revolting sections. Both Spains will start with some political changes to better represent the historical context of the moment. In Isabelline Spain, the landowners will start with the modernist ideology, and the armed forces will start with the liberal Praetorian ideology. Spain will start with this new set of laws, including a variant to the tenant farmers law called latifundius. Spain's oligarchy law will start with two amendments: Chamber of Procurators and electoral clientelism. In last week's dev diary, we went over the new amendments mechanic. Basically, these are additions to laws. Where law variants are entirely new laws based on one of the generic ones, amendments attach themselves to the already existing law. So in Spain at game start, you will have oligarchy and everything that normally comes with it, but along with that, you will have the additions of these two amendments. Carlist Spain will start with these ideologies, one being a full-on Carlist. You will begin with this journal entry to track the war. A new mechanic they're adding is guerrilla warfare. The Carlist War is a guerrilla war, and that will change the mechanics in the following way. 1. Battles generally tend to be smaller and are spawned at a much lower pace than in regular wars. 2. We have a set of new battle conditions that can occur that are specific to guerrilla wars. In general, they have a larger focus on inflicting more morale damage on the enemy and hopefully receiving less morale damage back from them. Many character traits have also been adjusted to account for this. And 3. No territories get occupied during the guerrilla war. A guerrilla war may escalate into a regular war if conflict-specific conditions are met. It sounds like this is a mechanic they want to expand on in other regions in the future, so something cool to look forward to as it's developed further. A really cool change coming to the game is an entirely new coup mechanic. Now, if an interest group's approval is lower than -10, and you have a general that belongs to that interest group, they can start a coup against the government. There will be two new attributes. Generals will have coup strength, and governments will have coup resistance. The success of a coup will depend on the comparison of a general's coup strength versus the government's coup resistance. Once the coup starts, you will get this journal entry. If a coup is successful, it will have effects dependent on who started it. In the example here, the petite bourgeoisie have started a coup because they oppose the enactment of appointed bureaucrats. If the coup is successful, that law enactment will stop. Landed voting will be enacted, the general that started the coup will become the leader of Spain, and the petite bourgeoisie are added to the government while everyone else is removed. Or in this case, the petite bourgeoisie's entire party will be added to the government. If you try to retire the general leading the coup before the coup journal entry is complete, you will give the coup a victory. However, one with weakened benefits. If a coup fails, a portion of the military proportional to the popularity of the general leading the coup will become radical, as will the interest group the general is part of. If you buy the DLC, you will have access to a decision called Depose Ruling Dynasty. This will allow you to orchestrate a coup against your own government. Since coups will now be a free mechanic, but were originally a mechanic part of the paid DLC Voice of the People, if you own Voice of the People, you will now get access to the Depose Ruling Dynasty decision that is part of the Iberian Twilight DLC, as well as access to these cool new sashes. When a general starts a coup, they get a sash added to their image in the colors of their flag. This is part of the paid DLC Iberian Twilight, but you will also get this now if you own Voice of the People. And speaking of paid content, now we move to narrative content that's part of the DLC Iberian Twilight. The big one will be this new journal entry called The Two Spains that tracks the progress of the Spanish Civil War. The top bar tracks the pull between conservatism and liberalism in Spain, and the bottom bar tracks the level of tension between the two sides. As the tension bar increases, so will the activism of all your political movements. Along with that, Spain's coup resistance will decrease. This means now if you want to make certain law changes or any political change, you have to keep in mind who will oppose this and maybe retire the generals of that opposing interest group before they have the chance to start a coup. Once they start the coup, retiring them hands a victory to the coup, so you have to act early. The pull between the liberal and conservative sides will be based on the clout of the associated interest groups. The liberal side is represented by the intelligentsia and trade unions, and the conservative side is represented by the landowners and the Catholic Church. You will also gain progress to each side for various other things, like generals who are part of any of those interest groups, and liberal or conservative political movements. However, you should keep in mind that in regards to this journal entry, socialist leaders and political movements don't count as liberal. Eventually, you will be given this new journal entry that acts as a parent journal entry to these 6 sub-journal entries. This will function in the same way the Ottoman Tanzimat does, requiring you to complete the sub-journal entries, working towards the completion of the parent one. This whole thing is tied to economic reform for Spain. These sub-journal entries are tied to different areas of your economy and come with goals to complete and benefits to be had. However, you have this button here that will allow you to reduce the objectives required to complete the sub-journal entries. This, of course, will give you reduced benefits to completing them. The sub-journal entries will also have their own way of reducing the requirements for completion. The idea here is that in order to complete the main journal entry, you have to complete all 6 of these sub-ones. One of these sub-journal entries might be too difficult to complete given your situation, so you can lower the cost of completion in order to not lock you out of completing the main one. Moving on to a new topic, there is now more detail in the relationship between Spain and its former colonies in the Americas. It will now be very difficult for you to interact diplomatically with the countries in South and Central America because at the time, Spain didn't recognize that these countries were independent. You have the option to recognize their independence by adding a Recognize Independence article to a treaty. This means you can get certain concessions from them because of it. This also means that when you play as any of the countries in Central or South America that were former colonies of Spain, you start with this journal entry to track your official recognition as an independent country. Or, as Spain, you can go full EU5 and recolonize all of them, or at least try to. Trying to reestablish these countries as your subjects comes with a heavy cost to foreign relations. Going back to the 2 Spains, if you have a successful coup while the tension bar here is very high, you will be given this journal entry for the Glorious Revolution. Your country will be ruled by a provisional government, and you will have the opportunity to pick a new monarch, or switch to a republic. And if you do switch to a republic, you will have access to this journal entry where you'll actually get the option to choose what you want your new flag to look like. However, there will also be anarchist sentiments in Spain as well, represented by this journal entry. Once you research anarchism and you get the anarchist movement, you will get this journal entry. The anarchist movement and its leaders will adopt the propaganda of the deed doctrine. When the activism of the anarchist movement is above 50%, they'll start carrying out terrorist activities in Spain. You'll get random events that result in the losing of politicians, executives, rulers, and heirs. Each time one of these events happen, the anarchist movement loses pop attraction. And lastly will be events focused around what I basically will call Spain messing with Morocco. These journal entries will help you gain land in Africa, and each successful journal entry will bring the armed forces asking for a new journal entry, bringing them more political clout. Some very exciting content coming for Spain in both the free 1.12 update and the DLC Iberian Twilight. As someone who loves to play in South America, I'm very excited about the prospect of having to push for recognition as an independent country. And as always, I highly recommend you read this dev diary in full, because these dev diaries always come with a lot of historical context for where these journal entries and events in the game are coming from. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please consider giving it a like and the channel a subscribe. A very special thank you to the channel members who help keep things going. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. That's it for now. As always, be awesome.